Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about telling times, the basics of the clock. We're going to be talking a little bit about analog clocks as well as digital clocks. The standard that the second grade students are working on is being able to tell and write time to the 5 minutes. We're not going to go all the way to the 5 minutes today. We're going to focus on the beginnings, and we'll look at the hour, the half hour, how to differentiate between the hands, and looking at a clock. So there are a few different things that I want you all to consider. I want you to think about a clock as a number line. And we can look at a number line and we can tell intervals of fives. So count with me. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Now on a clock we're going to continue our number line farther, but right now we're going to stop for just a second with our counting. We have a second number line on our clock. Our second number line has intervals of 1, 2, 3, 4. This number line goes all the way up to 12. Now let's think for a minute about what these two number lines would look like if we turn them into circles. And here we go. We have two circles. Our outside circle is actually going to begin at 0 right here. 0, 0. And if we continue around this number line counting by intervals of 5, count with me, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and back to 0. Now, those numbers aren't on this number line. We know that when we look at a clock. We have a second number line. And that number line is on the inside of our clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Now because we're only focusing on telling time and writing time to the fives, we're not going to worry about the smaller tick marks that are within the intervals of 5 on the outside number line. Let's take a second and let's look at, consider the hands of the clock. We all have looked at our clocks and we've realized that we have two different length hands. We have one hand that's a long hand. Now, a lot of you already know that the longer hand is the minute hand. I like to think about it in a couple of ways. The long hand is the minute hand. Long begins with L. I'm going to look at that long hand and think of it as long. The word minute is a long word. Then we have the hour hand. The hour hand is a shorter hand. Well, when I look at the word short, S is short. And when I look at the word hour for hour hand, the word hour is much shorter than the word minute. That's what I use to help me go back and forth between the minute hand and the hour hand. So looking back at the clock, we're going to throw some hands on here and we're going to start to tell a little bit of time. Now let's think about how time is written on a digital clock. If the digital clock is telling us that it's 2 o'clock, we know that that would be 2, 0, 0. Our hour and our minutes. So now we're going to start thinking about the two different hands that we were just talking about. Well, if it's 2 o'clock, we want our short hand to point to the 2 on the inside number line. So it's going to go from the center right out to the 2. We're going to then look at our minute hand, which is our longer hand, the one that's pointing at the outside circle, and we're going to see that that points at the 0, 0 to give us 2 o'clock. Let's look at another one. Let's say 5 o'clock. Take a second, think about how we're going to write 5 o'clock. Hopefully you said 5 colon 0 0. 5 hours and 0 minutes. So if we put our hour hand in first, we're going to go from the center with our shorthand out to the 5. And then we're going to go from the center up to the 0 0 with our long hand or our minute hand for 5 o'clock. Okay, this time I want you to take a second. I'm going to put the hands on the clock, and I'd like you to turn and tell somebody what time it happens to be. Okay, so hopefully you looked at that and you realized that the hour hand, the shorthand, pointing to the inside number line, points to the 8. And the minute hand, or the longer hand, pointing to the outside number line, is still at the 0, making it 8 o'clock. Now let's think about what's going to happen in order for us to go from an o'clock to a 30. Our minute hand is going to start at the 0 0. Every minute it's going to move. So every 5 minutes it's moved to a new position. And by the time we get to 30, we can see that that hand has moved halfway around the clock. Now thinking about that, if the minute hand is going to move halfway around the clock, how far should the hour hand move between the 2 hours? Well, hopefully you said that you realize that that's going to move halfway around the clock, which means if our hour hand started at 2, it will move a little bit also, but it will only move halfway in that 2 to 3 bucket. So if it moves halfway between the 2 and the 3 in the bucket, it will be right there, and we will now have a time of 2:30. Now if you heard me right, I did say in that bucket. That's the way that I like to think of the hours, that we have a bucket that goes from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, a bucket that goes from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock, a bucket that goes from 5 to 6. And the hour hand stays in the bucket, so it remains with the number that starts the bucket. So if I put an hour hand anywhere in this bucket, it belongs to the 2. If I put the hour hand anywhere in this bucket, it belongs to the 5. So which bucket am I now drawing? If you said the 9 o'clock bucket, you're absolutely right. So if we're going to look at 9:30, we're going to say that our hour hand is going to be in the 9 o'clock bucket, and since the minute hand moves halfway between the 0 and the 0, our hour hand will move halfway between the 9 and the 10, and we will have 9:30. The last part of the basics that I want to talk about are what we're going to look at for AM and PM. Now we know that AM and PM divide our day in half. Oftentimes we think about it as morning and night, but sometimes we forget that part of the night is also the morning. So let's take a day and let's think about when our day begins. Our day begins at midnight. And when does it end? Well, it ends at the next midnight. What's our halfway point in our day? 12 noon. So right there is where we're going to find our break in AM and PM. The first half of the day is AM. The second half of the day is PM. So the second we hit midnight, we begin our AM hours. The second we hit 12 noon, we hit PM. There's a lot more to come, but this is the basics to get you started in telling time. I hope that the video has helped you, and I hope you go back to look at it if you need to. Thank you.